Hi, everybody. So I have another review lesson for you here. For your argument breakdown worksheet, one of the things that you are asked to do is evaluate the author and source credibility for reading 2, for R2. So we're going to take a little bit of time to review some of that information so I can help you complete that part of the assignment thoughtfully. All right, so we have looked at a few examples of different authors with different levels of credibility over the past couple weeks. So I think in a previous slideshow, I gave you examples of three different authors writing on the topic of school safety or arming teachers. We had Jessica Hart, Michael Thompson, Dr. Elizabeth Patterson. We had the other example, Police Use of Force, with Kimberly Kindy. And then we had, of course, our reading one about reading comprehension online versus print. And we had Patricia Alexander and Lauren Singer Trackham here. And what I want you to think about is not like yes or no, an author's credible, but think about them sort of on a continuum. Okay. So what you want to think about is like, what are the strengths and weaknesses? What are the pros and cons in their backgrounds? And how much does that lend to their credibility? Right. So let's have a look at some of these examples. So we had Jessica Hart, who was like the mom who had a personal interest in the issue. She didn't really have any educational or career background in this. It was just kind of a personal interest. So, not very credible or authoritative on this topic. Depending on where this was published and what she included in her article, there might be use of her article for maybe personal stories, personal testimonies, if you were trying to write a research paper on this. But in terms of like factual evidence, this would not be my first choice. Michael Thompson and Kimberly Kindy, they are kind of middle of the road, and I think these would be pretty strong articles for somebody writing a research paper or an essay on this topic. Those were both the ones who were journalists. They were longtime journalists. They were well-respected journalists for major news outlets. They didn't have specific educational or career background in the topic, but it was a special interest of theirs. So they did have, some strong knowledge about it. So I feel like those would be pretty respectable, reliable authors on this topic. Then we get up to the Elizabeth Pattersons and the Patricia Alexanders, who, if you remember them, they had, and then one of them had, I think Patricia Alexander had 2 whole paragraphs talking about her education background. She has a PhD in this topic. Her whole career has been spent on reading comprehension and that sort of thing, literacy. She has won awards. She has held leadership positions in national organizations that have to do with this topic. She's been invited to speak in international conferences, right? She knows this stuff inside and out. All right. Same thing with Elizabeth Patterson. Her background was very similar. Now, the only problem you might have reading articles by these like high level experts is depending on where they're writing their where their article is being published, it might be hard for the everyday person to read and understand and explain in their own words. So we also have to have that in the back of our head when we're selecting articles to use in our own work. That if we can't understand it, if we can't explain the ideas in our own words, we are not going to be able to use that article. So the Patricia Alexander one was nice because it was published in a source that's written for the everyday reader. So she toned down her research so that people like you and me can read it and understand it. So we just have to be aware of that. We also had that Lauren Singer Trackham, who's kind of in the middle here. She hasn't been in her career very long, but her education background, her research interests lie in comprehension and literacy and that sort of thing. She just doesn't have the long standing background that Patricia Alexander had, but I would say that she is probably up there, kind of above the journalists, but below the long-term experts. All right. So what you want to think about is what's the overall educational background, career background, any awards, any other special notifications, anything that's relevant in the author's background. And then what does that tell you about whether they are a credible and reliable source? resource on this topic or not. Okay. So what you're going to do for the argument breakdown worksheet that you're doing right now is look up information on the author Steve Forbes. This is where Wikipedia is fine. You'll find a Wikipedia page on him. You might find bios on him somewhere else. So you are probably going to have to Google and find information somewhere else. This is a place where Wikipedia is okay. It's not always an okay source, but this just finding background information, it's fine. Remember that we're looking for what's relevant. All right. So where he went to elementary school is probably not relevant to what we're doing here. All right. Who he's married to is not relevant to what we're doing here. So his education background, his career background, his areas of interest, any possible bias he might have, and any other relevant background information. So what you'll do is you'll list what you find about him, and you should just make a note of where you found that information. So if you say, according to the article about him on Wikipedia, and then list what you find. But then you want to write a sentence that gives an overall statement. So sometimes students make the mistake of just listing the background information and leave it at that. I want you to tell me, what does that background information indicate to you about the author's credibility? You list all this stuff. He went to school here. He has this background. This is his career. Here's his possible bias. Answer the question, so what? Right? Tell me what that means to you. This is going to be you telling me what your interpretation is, okay? All right. So that'll be the author credibility section on the argument breakdown worksheet. Another thing that you're doing is looking at the source. You're looking at where this article was published, right? So again, we had sources with different levels of credibility as we've gone through the past couple lessons. The climate change example, we had the Natural Climate Blog, we had Climate Today News, we had the Global Climate Journal. The police use of force example was from the Washington Post, and the reading comprehension, online versus print, was from a publication called The Conversation. So again, we want to think about, I have to click a few times here, a continuum. There we go. All right. So the Natural Climate Blog, and if you need to go back and look at that, it was not written by experts. It had advertisements on it. It just maybe some pseudoscience in there. So that's going to be down here. All right. Less credible, authoritative. Climate Today News was a little bit better. That was the one where it had some articles written by experts, others just written by people with an interest. It had some articles had references cited, others didn't. So, it would be kind of a pick and choose there. The Conversation is pretty good, middle of the road. The Washington Post is getting up to kind of stronger, more respected, more well-known magazines and newspapers. And the Global Climate Journal, I would put up here at the top. But as I said with the authors that were all the way over there, the same thing with some of these journals. They might be written at a level that somebody who's not an expert in climate change, they might not be able to read and understand it. And if you can't read and understand it and explain it in your own words, you're not going to be able to use it in your paper, right? It's just not going to work out for you. So I usually tell students to kind of look for these middle of the road ones. They're reliable, they're trustworthy, but they're still accessible to the everyday reader, okay? So now you're going to look up USA Today, which is where your R2 was published. And there's two resources that I've given you for checking source credibility and bias. There's Media Bias Fact Check, and there's Ad Fontes Media. Those links will be posted in the D2L page as well. So go to either one of these, look up USA Today, and see what you can find out about any political bias it has and how credible it's considered to be. Okay? Political leanings, factual reporting, any other relevant information. And as with the author, don't just list the information, sum it up. What does this mean for you if you're reading an article about student debt forgiveness in USA Today? Okay? How credible is it to you? Sum it up. So I hope that little reminder helped you. And if you have questions, let me know. All right, bye.